today let's cover the topic of mindfulness. This might seem like a very nebulous or hard to put our finger on concept, but really it's not. And so the point of today is to really break it down into why is this such a difficult concept to understand and implement. So first, let's talk about what is mindfulness. Well, really all it is being able to focus your awareness on the present. And what that means is being able to focus on where you are in space, like where your body is, where you're feeling, what your emotions are feeling, all of these different things that are happening and that our body's having to recognize. And that's actually pretty overwhelming. And I'm going to talk about why that's overwhelming. But that's all mindfulness is acceptance of the present space and receiving that presence with an open-mindedness and less judgmental way. So first, let's talk about why is that so hard? Now we've got to get into our nervous system. And so if we think about our brain and spinal cord, so that's nervous system, we have a lot of information that the brain has to receive all the time. I mean, it's just constant. So right now, I've got temperature in the room, I've got what my hands are touching, what my feet are touching. I've got noises that are outside of the window. I've got lights, for the lighting to make sure that you can see my face without a bunch of shadows. I've got the air conditioner blowing so I can hear that. So I've got a little bit of hunger. I haven't finished my smoothie for the day. So can you imagine, my brain is receiving all of these different signals, and I haven't even touched on the signals that it's also receiving in other ways. So the brain needs to say what is important and what isn't important. And that's where training comes in, because we need to help the brain understand what is important. Because if we pay attention to everything all the time, you wouldn't get anything done. You would be constantly trying to figure out, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And that would be way too overwhelming. And therefore, your brain would say, too much. I can't actually focus on completing any one subject or topic or whatever it might be. Therefore, what we need to do is with intention, which means I'm going to drive my awareness towards what I want my brain to focus on. So let's say right now I'm in my space, I've got my chair that I'm sitting on, and I want to say, listen, I want to be super present to where I am in space. Well, an easy thing to do is focus on proprioception. And proprioception is just, where's our body in space? And so how I can improve the awareness of where my body in space is I increase the number of surfaces that I touch. For example, I can my legs are crossed right now. I can put both feet, I'm going to uncross my legs, I'm going to put both feet on the ground. So now I have nice consistent feedback for where the ground is compared to where my body is, because I have 2 feet giving me that feedback. That immediately grounds just a little bit. I can put my hands on my knees. That can be helpful. Or if I'm sitting on a surface, actually putting my hands on that surface helps me ground to that surface and say, okay, clearly I'm sitting on a chair. My feet are clearly on the ground. And so these are ways that my brain is receiving the information of where are you in space. And the more that I drive awareness to what I want it to focus on, the more the brain will focus on that. The other thing I like to do with sitting is I'll have my whole back rested on the chair and my head rested on the chair. So I can just sit back and really work on, okay, now I'm gonna really start to relax. So when my brain can trust where I am in space, it's like, oh great, that's very helpful. I don't have to focus on other things. I know you're not moving. I know you're not about to move. I don't have to prepare for some sort of complex motor movement pattern. It can just chill. Then from there, we can work on things that are attached to us. Our lungs, our breathing. These are things that we can do that are always with us. So working on breathing techniques while we're there helps to release hormones that are actually calming hormones for our body. And so doing some breathing techniques while I focus on where my body is in space is just a great way to bring me to that present moment. The other part of mindfulness, though, is not just bringing you to the present moment, but it's coming about that with a sense of acceptance of that present moment. It's not about trying to change that moment unless you're in an unsafe situation. So it's not about saying, okay, I'm sitting on a chair, I don't like it, I'm uncomfortable, blah, 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 all this like negative self-talk that happens. That's the opposite of mindfulness. It's really about, how can I be present and accepting? And from there, that's where everything can jump off of there. So that's where change can happen, is saying like, I'm present and I accept where I am. Then we can move on to, let's say, I need to prepare for something. I need to prepare for a meeting. I need to prepare for something else. I can, with intention, say, how do I want to be received into this next interaction? How do I want to present myself in that next interaction? How do I want my information to come across to the next person? So now we've come from accepting the present moment into preparation for the next moment. That is what sets us up to have a more successful next interaction. So that's kind of how you can implement mindfulness in the present. Now, I'm going to take a step back and say, we've talked about mindfulness and we've talked about just, some of the general concepts of mindfulness. However, I really want to come back to the physiology just a little bit, because I think the more we understand our body and how it works, the better we can appreciate the techniques that we utilize. So, why we have such a hard time with just calming down and being present. A lot of that comes back to just overall how we've evolved over time. So we've got multiple systems of our nervous system. It's called our autonomic nervous system. So you're not really thinking about this. This is just kind of happens in a reactionary way. So we've got our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response. And that is a protective mechanism. That is how we survive. That's back when we were like running away from, people trying to attack us and things like that. That fight or flight response is survival mode. Parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite of that. It's the nervous system that calms our body back down. And so the one heightens everything, the other one calms it down. Now, when we are in any kind of a stressful situation and it does not involve us fighting for our life, we still have the same exact sympathetic response. So that's what makes it very difficult, because life is full of stressors. I could be running late. I could have a tough interaction with somebody. I could have received an email that I thought was like, what? Like, I didn't mean it like that, and they misunderstood me. And so you get you get worked up. That same exact response happens. Our heart rate elevates. We start kind of like, our blood pressure starts coming up a little bit. Our respiration rate comes up a little bit. Our stress hormones start circulating. It's the same physiologic response, even though our life was not in danger. So that's a bummer, because if we let that keep happening, then we're always going to stay in this heightened reactive state. And when we react to things, there's not really time to kind of have that planning of what's the outcome of this reaction going to be. So that's, when the words just kind of come out of your mouth and you're like, well, I didn't mean it like that, but the person took it in the wrong way, and now you get into this like bop, 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 bop. It doesn't need to happen. It will happen. We are all reactionary beings, and that's where the the having to come back and do some like reconciling and bringing back the relationship so that we don't make it worse and worse. We don't want to further divide. Sometimes we want to repair. The repair process is great, right? So when we mess up and we repair, we actually create a stronger bond with whoever we repaired with. So don't everyone messes up. I mess up. Everybody does. But that's sympathetic nervous system, and it is triggered so easily. parasympathetic nervous system, that calming nervous system, takes intention to trigger that. It doesn't just like naturally get triggered. You really have to work on implementing strategies to trigger that. And so that's what makes it hard, is because you have to actually think about it and put it into practice. So now that we know why it's so hard, is because our brain is receiving, well, I'm going to say why it's so hard to implement mindfulness is because our brain is constantly receiving signals all the time, and it doesn't necessarily focus on the signals that we want it to focus on. It's going to focus on the signals that are the loudest. And so that's when reactions come out, and reactions are not preparatory. The other reason why mindfulness is difficult to implement is because our sympathetic nervous system, or that heightened nervous system, is triggered so easily with any benign stressor. A benign stressor, meaning something that isn't actually going to harm you, triggers the same response as a stressor of something that will harm you. So really understanding that, and understanding that the stress hormones are still going to be released and you're still going to react, is what helps you kind of come to yourself with acceptance to say, I know this is going to happen, and I'm going to work on strategies to prepare me for the next thing. So now let's talk about, how do we implement this? Well, when we think of mindfulness, we go back into practice. So mindfulness means the only way you get better at this is practicing. So the easiest concept to think about is, I'm going to relate this back to exercise. So if I run 3 days a week, right? So I prepare my body to be able to run. I do it consistently. Now, let's say I'm out in a parking lot and my kiddo runs away from me real quick. I can sprint after them, catch them, get them and bring them back to the car. And I never had to freak out, because that sprint that I just had to do, I already run multiple days a week. So that wasn't a big deal for me to, catch him, make sure he was safe, and make sure, no, we're not going to go this way. We're going to get back to the car. So mindfulness is the same way. If we don't practice it, and then all of a sudden in the moment we need to use it, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be clunky, and we're going to struggle. And then it's like, oh, this doesn't work for me. Well, mindfulness does work for everybody, honestly. We all have the capacity to do it. It's just, do we take the time to implement the practice part of it in order to then be able to use it in the present moment? Because the present moment is when it's a lot harder to use it, because we're triggering likely sympathetic nervous system. So we're starting to heighten everything. And in that heightened state, now we're going to try and do it? No. We want to implement it when nothing is heightened and it's a lot easier. So the concept of practice harder than you play really comes into play in life throughout so many different concepts. So now let's think about, I just kind of drew this for you. So mindfulness, daily practice, that's what leads us to improving our present use, which then improves our future. Because, like I said, if I come about a meeting with, I do a little bit of mindfulness practice, and then I prepare myself for, let's say, a meeting, now I'm likely going to have an improved future, because that meeting is likely going to go better because I've prepared myself for that. Because of the practice, in the moment, my preparation might really only be 5 seconds. Honest answer. So if I know I'm going to go into something where I need to really be diligent about how my words are received, then I'm going to pause. For me, what I do is I take a couple of breaths. If I'm standing, I will typically put my hands on my legs, just because I just like feeling that. I feel my feet on the ground. I take 5 breaths, and while I'm doing those 5 breaths, I will say, like in my head, I don't necessarily say it out loud. Don't look weird in front of people. But I'll say in my head, my intention for the meeting. My intention is for this to be understood, or whatever that might be, so that there's no chance I'm going to go in with kind of doing this roundabout, convoluted, whatever. My intention is this, and I want to make sure that I can also, because that's the thing, it's like, what do I want to be heard? But I need to prepare myself to receive information. And so it's a two-way street. So I also need to say, I am ready to receive the information that is going to be told to me, and make sure that I receive that with open ears so that I can then really dive through what that other party or group of people are trying to get across to me. Because that's the other thing, is like, we have our goals, but we're not necessarily ready to listen to somebody else's. And now we can actually have a dialogue that will go back and forth in a healthy manner. Nobody's defensive, and so much progress comes out of that, which is great because multiple minds are going to have all these different perspectives, and your meeting will then be way, way, way more beneficial, and you'll move forward faster, and people feel empowered. We don't get all that negative, like, defensive stress. Sympathetic starts coming up. See what I mean? Like, so that's what I mean with mindfulness, is that when we practice it, then in the present use, you can implement it quickly, and then it improves that future outcome. All right, now let's break it down even further. What does practice mean when it comes to mindfulness? Practice can mean a lot of different things. It can mean meditation. That could be guided meditation. That could be meditation where you're just working on breathing. A lot of different ways to meditate, but that just taps you in. Meditation taps you into where are you in your space, and where are your thoughts in your space, and quieting those thoughts down. That's meditation. It's so hard. It really is hard. Lots of practice. Mindfulness is also grounding. So meditation does kind of help ground you, but then you can also work specifically on grounding, of just, again, where am I in space? If I can ground actively, I can ground passively. So grounding actively means that I'm going to be doing something while I'm grounding. And so I prefer walking barefoot when I do this, because I have all sorts of nerve endings on the bottom of my feet. We all do. Unless you've sustained nerve damage, then your nerves aren't talking as well. But if you do have intact nervous system, then when we walk on a surface, especially a surface that has texture, grass, carpeting, nothing that's going to hurt you, your nerve endings are going to pick up that surface, and they're going to say, oh, like, that feels different than a shoe. And so it immediately draws your attention to your foot, and your foot's connected to the ground. And gravity keeps us on the ground. So therefore, we are grounded to the earth immediately just by noticing the grass underneath our feet. And so now I can walk, I can feel the wind, I can notice the clouds, everything that's in my present moment. I can hear the bird, who knows, whatever's in that moment. It doesn't have to be outside. It could be inside. I've got a textured carpet in my room, and so I love that because I can put my feet on there and I can just walk back and forth a little bit. I honestly will typically take my lunch. I will eat standing just because I like walking back and forth on a barefoot while I'm barefoot, in order to just eat and think, how was my morning? I think it was a good morning. Yeah, it was good. I'll just kind of like go through it, and I'll say, okay, how am I right now? Well, I am a little hungry, but I'm eating, so that'll fix that. I'm a little thirsty. I should probably finish that glass of water. Little headache. Maybe I should fix my posture. Things like that. Like, how am I feeling? Sometimes I just have to ask myself that, because otherwise it's like very easy to blow past all of that. And then you just are like, okay, now I'm ready for the afternoon. And it just kind of like, it just helps you get that little check-in. It's like, I would have forgot to have that glass of water. I would have completely forgotten because you just get going and you're so busy. So that's kind of like how you can implement practice, and you're not like taking more time to do this. That's not necessarily, this doesn't have to be a time suck of an activity. For real, you can implement mindfulness while you're on your commute to work. Like, one thing I like to do when I'm driving in the morning is I feel the car seat behind me. I can feel the headrest behind my head. And so I'll take some breaths. I like to do affirmations in the morning as well, because we're always preparing for the future. We're present in the moment, but we're preparing for the future. So I'll kind of like, I can feel my hands. I'm obviously paying attention to the cars around me because, you want to be safe. At the same time, I can still know where my head is in space. I can still be present to that. I can be present to, like, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I, like, what sensations is my body feeling? Is anything uncomfortable? Can I fix that? If I can fix that, then I can, that ting that's coming into my brain, I can quiet that ting down, and then we can move on about the day. So positive affirmations, especially first thing in the morning, what that means is that I'm going to talk about, and I say these out loud. I've got my kiddo in the back seat, and we do this every morning. I say, what's going to make today a good day? I don't know. Well, do you have like a thought? Like just one. Well, I'm really looking forward to playing on the playground. Awesome. What is so great about the playground? I love, he calls it his pod, I love my pod. Like, we have so much fun together. Like, so you love feeling connected with your friends. Yeah, it's so fun. And we get to run around and we get to burn our energy. Like, I love that. So looking forward to like having that positive connection, now he's more likely to like see those friends and say like, yeah, I've been looking forward to this. He's more likely to then receive those friends with acceptance rather than I'm tired, I'm kind of hungry, I haven't had my lunch yet, and so just kind of like looked at me in a weird way. So I'm going to look back in a weird way. And so now we just kind of started with this negative interaction, when if we can start with positive affirmations, it's more likely to go well. My positive affirmations look a little bit different. I don't play on the playground during my work day. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it actually might be kind of great, but there's not one real close to my office. So my positive affirmations are more like, for me, something that's super important for my day to stay calm is I need to stay on top of my documentation. I treat patients all day. So being able to stay on top of that helps tremendously because now I don't have more work at the end of the day. So staying efficient with that is super, super key. I don't get jammed up later. So I'll say, I'm going to really work on making sure that my documentation is efficient. I also am really looking forward to seeing who I can help today. Like I get paid to help people feel better. I mean, that's a great job. Like, it's really cool. So I could reframe that. Who's going to come in complaining of pain today? Right? That's one way to start the day. Or I can start the day with, I'm really looking forward to seeing who we can help today, because it's awesome to be able to have somebody come in not being able to do something or struggling and then leave with confidence and feeling better about how they're going to enter the rest of their day. And so it's the same exact day. It's just, how do I enter that day and enter that moment? If I can come to that day with intention of having a positive day, I'm way more likely to have a positive day. That's how mindfulness practice leads to use in the present, and then the future actually becomes a better future. That doesn't mean things don't go wrong. That doesn't mean that you don't have to respond to what happens during the day. We call them pivots. So when something comes up that you weren't prepared for, all you do is you pivot a little bit and say, okay, well, now that new information has come to light, whether it's good or bad, I've got a flat tire on the way to work. New information has come to light, and we need to make a plan for how to address it. This is real life. It is messy and it is frustrating, and there's times where you just want to throw something across the room and scream and yell. Not wrong, right? Not wrong to like have some sort of an outburst. However, if we can still have like a positive way to like spin it and keep moving forward, then one thing that hiccups the day doesn't need to derail the rest of the day. So if we can hiccup, pivot, get around the hiccup, and get back on track. And now the day is actually a good day. It just had a hiccup. Most of my days have a hiccup somewhere. That's the real answer. And so seeing it as a hiccup instead of this whole day was bad because I started off with a flat tire, right? Like, that's a bummer, because like there's going to be a lot more bad days than good days if we let one flat tire be the total like reason for why that day was bad. I mean, it's just a tire, right? Some rubber, there's a tube in there. It gets, there's stuff that gets fixed. You might be late to something, do in advance, communicate that, say, hey, I'm coming with apologies. This is something that was unforeseen, and own it, and do your best to move on. If you're getting attacked from one side, it might be something where you need to create some distance for that, because there's things that you just can't change, is what it is. So you can have apologies and say, okay, we're moving forward. We're not going to stay in this moment. Somebody wants to stay there, politely say, I'm leaving the moment. You can stay here. I just think you'd have a better day if you didn't stay here. And then we can move forward. Just be nice about it. That's all. Some people will have a hard time. I have a hard time sometimes. We all do. So that's the part of the acceptance of where we are with our mindset and where others are with their mindset. And so let's just think like big picture, right? Grounding yourself in the now gives you the strength to deal with the future. So always remember that. Really try and put some of this into practice with either daily meditation. That could be in the morning, that could be at the end of the day. It could be guided. It doesn't have to be guided. You just search on YouTube and you'll find some just guided meditations that you can listen to. You can do positive affirmations, you can do grounding, and then just really thinking about coming to any space, any conversation, like anything with intention. Just really understand what's my why? And the more that you really understand your why, everything becomes more clear and easier. So stay tuned. We'll keep covering all sorts of different topics.